Welcome to the Mindful Academy podcast with me, Jennifer Askey. I'm a professional certified coach and academic workplace consultant. On this podcast, I talk about doing well personally so that you can perform well professionally. I talk about intentional career planning and about how to get out of your own way and align yourself with success. Thank you for joining me. Hello, and welcome back to the Mindful Academy. I'm Jennifer Askey, I'm your host, and today I'm going to be talking about the myth of the Renaissance person in academia. And why am I going to talk about this? Because I notice in my coaching conversations with my clients and with the teams that I coach that there's a persistent belief or a persistent habit of work and a habit of thinking in higher education that holds that if you are in an academic role, you are expert at a whole raft of things. You are expert at teaching, you are expert at research, you are expert at leadership and service. And if you have other roles, like a clinical role, you're expert at that too, which I get it, rigor is important. Also, this notion that expertise is expected in all of those areas goes hand in hand with the notion that 100% effort, 100% commitment in all of those areas is required all the time. And I'm going to push back on that a little bit because I don't think it helps you. I don't think it's what the institution actually needs or requires. And it is like, this is a recipe for burnout. Right? 100% effort to research, 100% effort to teaching, 100% effort to leadership and service equals you are a dried up husk of a human being. And we don't want that. So what does 100% effort in teaching look like from where you are, right? Does it look like, okay, you prepare, you know the stuff, okay, but you prepare your classes. Maybe you prepare slides, maybe they're beautiful. Right? PowerPoints of beauty and luxury. I was trained in pedagogy in graduate school before PowerPoints were a thing. I used a chalkboard. I didn't even have whiteboards in most of the classrooms that I taught in throughout my career. I was in old buildings because that's where the humanities were housed. But this notion that you prepared, it's something beautiful, then you're in the classroom. There's your active engagement with the student. There's the student-led pedagogy that you've become expert in. There is engagement. There's classroom management. There's mentoring and supervision. There's creating rubrics for grading. There's actually doing the marking. And then there's the whole classroom management system that you have to become expert in. And if you are in a contingent role and cobbling together an income by working across institutions, maybe you get to work with Desire to Learn and Canvas and Blackboard and Moodle, and I don't even know how many there are out there anymore. But all of those things you are expected to master. And maybe there's support for some of that at your institution, maybe there isn't. That might depend on your field, that might depend on the place where you work, but at any rate, that's just teaching, and that's before we even get into the content, right? That's before we get into staying on top of changes in your field, updating things, being responsive to your disciplinary environment when it comes to teaching. That's a lot of work. Then 100% effort in research. That, of course, looks different depending on your field, but even before we get to the work of research, right? The collecting data, the being in the archive, whatever your research looks like, there's, do you have to apply for grants? What does being an expert in grant application look like? What are the supports for those things? You can imagine, right, what I'm going to say. There are just a million little things that go into research. There's there's applying for money, there's managing that money, there's writing reports, there's keeping a publication pipeline going, there's writing the stuff, there's submitting, revising, accepting feedback and critique, participating in scholarly communication, going to conferences, right? pitching your work to journals, pitching your work to publishers, if you write monographs, right? All of that takes work, and not just time work, but like emotional work. You have to put yourself out there over and over and over again. And this, of course, is happening parallel to the emotional work of teaching, where you are in front of or together with a group of students who are going to come to you for things. And if you are a woman, if you are a person of color, more students are going to come to you with things. Maybe you learn, maybe you are the point of first disclosure for some people, and you have to manage that. There can be a lot of associated trauma that comes with being in the classroom with a bunch of undergrads. On a side note that deserves its own podcast, the statistics about mental health among undergraduates in the US and Canada are alarming. And what I hear when I see that is, oh my goodness, all of these students who are suffering anxiety and depression at ever higher numbers, and are sensitized to their environment in the way that I was never shown how to be sensitized to my environment when I was their age. They're bringing that anxiety, that depression, that fear into their work, into the classrooms. And professors are the front line for all of that, right? So there's emotional labor involved in teaching and research, and some of it can be quite intense. And then we get into leadership. That's a whole other thing. Maybe if your early career, you have a year or two of protection from service. I'm going to put protection in bunny quotes, because people who are protected from service in the first couple of years, what I hear a lot is that once you have tenure, the floodgates open with the rationale that, well, you didn't have to for X number of years, and now you really have to step up to the plate. So whether it's committee work, or supervision, or dissertation and master's committees, those sorts of departmentally based service, hiring committees, university service on the faculty association or on the Senate or whatever collegial governance body your institution has, and then service to the discipline, professional associations, conference organization, like all of that is service. And another side note here, I read something, can't remember, I wish I could give them credit, read something recently that was aimed at early career researchers talking about service. And they made it really clear, and I'll reiterate this, if you are required to do service in your pre-tenure years, to the extent possible, make that service to the profession. Because that service to the profession is portable, transferable, is recognizable across institutions. Service to the department, service to the institution demonstrates loyalty, but the university or college might not reciprocate towards you, but it might not be legible as legible across institutions. But again, all of these things, if you do each of these things to the letter, to the T, totally committed, have it all out there, you will be exhausted. So if you're exhausted, look at your pie chart. I'm going to talk a little bit about a metaphorical or a real pie chart of where your time goes, where your energy and effort goes, and realize that maybe something's going to give. And when we get to the point where something needs to give, we might just like crumble and fall apart. And that's not desirable, right? It's not desirable for you. It's not desirable for your institution, your employer, your students. None of that is desirable. So let's be strategic about what has got to give and what you want to give, right? What you want to give away and what you want to lean into. So if you're doing the math, the mental math, the emotional math of how much time and effort you're putting into these things, what are you learning? So let's think of a metaphorical pie chart where you maybe think in a number of slices. So maybe you have the teaching, research, and service slices. That's fine. But there are other slices in your life. There's your physical health. Are you moving your body? Are you eating well? Are you getting a good night's sleep? Right? Those are actually non-negotiables, right? Or they should be. There's your mental health. Do you have solitude? Do you have activities and people and places that rejuvenate you? So just mental and physical health, two other slices in a pie chart. Family commitments, community commitments, right? People you want to be around, people you need to be around. It's another slice or two of the pie chart. Hobbies. You ever heard of those? Do you remember what those are? Hobbies? Right? Horseback riding, walking your dog, knitting and crochet, mosaic tiles. I don't care what it is, right? Paint by numbers, but something that is maybe not productivity oriented, not output oriented, not connected somehow to your job. When I was teaching in the humanities, I read a lot. I still read a lot. But the real struggle for me always has been, am I reading something because I'm going to have to teach it or use it or write about it? Or am I reading something just for fun? And it wasn't until I left my active teaching role that I rediscovered reading for fun. Right? And no, like 17 hobbies, that's probably too many, but taking up something that actually allows you to be creative or be in solitude or be contemplative or whatever it is that a hobby might offer you that you're not getting at work. It's another slice of the pie. And I invite you to think of how many slices in your pie do you want and how much space are you giving to each of those slices? And how happy are you with each of those slices, right? So there are like Wheel of Life. I keep holding my hands up on the video. There are Wheel of Life templates that you can find online, either Wheel of Life or Wheel of Adult Fulfillment, that sort of pre-lay these out for you. But I find that we have to customize them if we're really looking at in detail at your role, like teaching, research, service, all of those things that aren't going to show up on anybody else's standard Wheel of Life. And figure out, like, how big are those segments? And how content are you with the work that's happening there, or the activity or time that's happening there, right? And I will say that, especially if you're an early career faculty member or researcher, you are probably experiencing the narrative that excellence across the board is the absolute bare minimum. And when you dig a little deeper and look a little bit more closely, you'll be able to differentiate at your institution where the rubber really hits the road and what they really care about. Like, do they really care about teaching and they want you to have a solid publication record? Do they really care about research and you need to just not be a disaster in the classroom, right? And I understand that you don't want to be just above disaster in the classroom, and you don't want to be just okay as a scholar. And also, I understand that if you are trying to excel in all of those areas, you are creating the recipe for burnout. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to be a little more strategic about this. And I'll offer the metaphor from Filthy, Filthy Capitalism of you being sort of the strategic CEO of your career. And being the strategic CEO of your career, or crafting your career arc on a strategic level, is the act of some long-range thinking and focusing on a mid-range milestone and a long-range milestone, and say, what is going to get me on track to my version of success, right? So if your version of success is tenure, if your version of success is promotion, if your version of success is a new role, a new institution, a certain kind of grant, right? It is important to say, oh, it would be lovely if in 5 years this was going on in my life and career, right? I lived in this place, I was doing this kind of work, I had these kinds of publications, this kind of grant, this kind of role. Know what you're aiming for, okay? That's the first thing. And then once you know what you're aiming for, think about what are the steps that are going to get you there. And if you're increasing your focus on winning a teaching award, getting a certain kind of grant, right? If that's going to be one of your measurements of success, what might you decrease your focus on? If we think of a balanced career, maybe balance doesn't mean simultaneous. Balance means over time. So here's a chunk of time where you're intensely working on one aspect of your career portfolio and other things are taking a back seat. Here's a moment in time when you're intensely working on things in your personal and family life and other things are taking a back seat. And say, okay, if we're aiming towards certain goals, what can take a back seat, what can't, right? Another way to think about this, so there's the strategic CEO, right? You do some long range planning. I love doing that with my clients. It's tons of fun. And sometimes we don't follow the plan that we make to a T, but creating that vision of success and what it might look like, super engaging. It really connects you to what success looks like for you, okay? Another alternative to all things all the time for all the people is to come up with a metaphor for your career or for you as a professional person. This is a little bit silly, a little bit fun, but what is a good metaphor for how you want to show up to your own life at work? A metaphor for how you want to show up in your own life at home. Is there a metaphor that combines those things? I had to do an exercise like this recently in my mastermind, where I'm a member of a mastermind with a bunch of other women entrepreneurs. And we were asked to come up with, I believe it was an animal that represented us in our lives and in our businesses. And after some high quality eye rolling on my part, I dove right in because I'm going to get out of an exercise whatever I put into it. So I dove into this one saying, what's this going to give me? And I played with it for a while and laughed at myself a bit. And what I came up with was greyhound, which is hysterical because I do not run. I used to run before I got a little bit older and my knees got much less happy and hips. I never ran fast. Like there's nothing about me that is greyhound, except perhaps my energy. Because I do have, when it comes to my work, a very go, 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 rush, rush, zoom, zoom attitude. Very action focused. I don't go back into contemplation super readily. I want to get up and do. Even when taking a break and being contemplative and reflective might serve me better, I'm very biased towards action. And when I am not go, 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 I'm literally on the couch with my dog. And so thinking of the greyhound as either Zoom or nap, right? And so that allows me to laugh a little bit at myself and to think about like, what does that mean for pacing, right? What does it mean to pace myself? So maybe thinking of your metaphorical animal will help you either diagnose what's working well or what's working not so well. Or maybe it's an aspirational animal. Like I want to be the beaver. I mean, that's a silly thing. I just brought it up, but silly is valuable, right? Do you want to be the woodchuck, right? Determined, the prairie dog, underground, communicative, cute, friendly, right? Because there are disruptive animals, there are collective communicating animals, right? Think about how you show up to your work. And if you can come up with a nice metaphor, see if it rings true to you. Like, oh, this fits me. I love it. This is how I want to work. Or if you think, oh my goodness, I'm totally a beaver and I don't want to be a beaver, right? I want to be an otter, more play, less work, less dam building, more hanging out. Just two examples. The third thing that is an alternative to 100% in all the areas all the time, the third way of thinking about alternatives is to use, it's also a metaphor exercise, but think of your life, your time, your week, your day as like a glass mason jar. Maybe a big one, right? Pretty good sized glass mason jar for canning large things. And if you put, and you have in front of you all the things that go into that jar, but it's going to be a beachscape jar. So there are pebbles and rocks and sea glass and sand and shells. And if you start just scooping it all up and saying it all has to fit and just scooping and dropping and scooping and dropping, things will spill out, things might get broken. It's not great. So the strategy is to look at what's in front of you and pick up the big items, the really pretty shell, the big rocks, and put those in first. Right? This is prioritization 101. Big rocks, pretty shells go in first. Then pebbles, sea glass, smaller things, they go in, but they fall around the big rocks and they take up smaller bits of space. And then you take the sand, which is email management, marking papers, submitting grades, and you pour that in and it fills in the cracks. But if you start with the sand, if you start with the tasks and the quotidian stuff, you will never fit those big things in. So whether you want to think about big rocks and little rocks and sand, or long-range strategic planning, or the metaphor of how you want to show up energetically to your work, there are alternative ways of configuring what you put in to your job so that you get something out of it, as opposed to just input all the time, 100% effort in everything, where you're just asking for burnout. So if you found this interesting and intriguing, I would love to hear, right? And actually, before I wrap up, one more thing. Okay, so there are the three sort of tactics: strategic planning, metaphor, big rocks, little rocks, sand. The other thing to do, and this is maybe even before you get to coming up with an alternative, is to practice noticing. If you spend a week, say, just paying attention to how the energy you are putting into tasks, the energy that tasks demand of you, the effort that you feel around things, the level of importance you ascribe to things, and just notice. For example, I was speaking with a colleague a month or so ago and asking her where a big chunk of her time was going that was really frustrating and draining. And she mentioned marking and grading papers. And we talked a little bit about what her system for marking and grading was. And I asked the very simple question of, what are your students getting out of your marking? What are they learning from the comments, grades, feedback you provide them on their work? And she didn't have a good answer for that in the moment. We talked about it a little bit and realized that she was probably over-investing in something because she felt the urge to be complete and thorough and ideal, right? Every time she had student work in front of her, without doing the strategic thinking around, what's the purpose of the exercise that I'm looking at here? What were the students supposed to accomplish? What feedback makes sense at this juncture? Do they have the option to revise work or retake work? And thinking of making the feedback match the exercise, right? As opposed to feedback and marking always requires this kind of effort and input from me in order to be thorough, right? And I mentioned one conversation I had with a client, but as I was talking, I can think of like 3 or 4 other conversations along those lines. So where there are 3 or 4 people, there are hundreds. So just think about strategically, what is the value of this work for its audience, right? What is the value of my teaching for the students and for the department? And give it that level of effort, right? What is the value of the grade I'm providing? What are they going to get out of it, right? So practice noticing, and just doing that for a while might help you diagnose, okay, I'm giving everything, and Here's where I get more energy. Here's where I lose more energy. What can I do with that to maybe strategically plan alternatives? Because if you approach everything with the urge to optimize, right? Completionism, optimization all the time in everything. In my experience with my clients, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment because we cannot be optimal all the time. We can do incremental improvements, we can do trade-offs, and we can be strategic, but optimal in all things all the time is probably superhuman. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I hope this was useful. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jennifer@jenniferaskey.com or find me on LinkedIn. That's, I think, where I'm spending most of my time today in social media. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mindful Academy podcast. For questions about this episode, suggestions for future episodes, or to request a consultation with me, email me at jennifer@jenniferaskey.com. This episode was recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 lands. The songs included in the intro and outro for this podcast are Heartache by Silent Partner and Piano Store by Jimmy Fontanez of Media Right Productions, both sourced through the audio library. Thank you so much for listening.